Hello, this is Biz Big Picture, connecting the dots to deliver you the big picture. Intel, the semiconductor giant. There was a time when the Intel Inside sticker was widely recognized as a guarantee of a high-performance computer. However, Intel reported a $3 billion operating loss in the first half of 2024, and its stock price plummeted from $50 to $20 for the first half of 2024 after the release of its first half earnings. In response to its financial challenges, Intel has initiated a drastic cost-cutting plan. The plan involves suspending dividend payouts and eliminating 15% of its workforce. Regarding its foundry investments, Intel put its Poland and Germany projects on hold for 2 years and canceled the Malaysian project entirely. However, the construction of the Ohio facility remains on schedule. Let's take a deep dive into what's happening at Intel. But before doing it, let's first look at the broader market trends. Was it Edison's invention of the light bulb in 1879 or Franklin's kite experiment in 1752 that truly brought electricity into our lives? It's unclear who first discovered and studied electricity. However, even before Edison invented the light bulb, Faraday had already published the law of electromagnetic induction in 1831, leading to extensive research on electric motors. Additionally, Graham Bell patented the telephone in 1876. And Bell founded the Bell Telephone Company, which later became the Bell System and eventually evolved into AT&T as we know it today. In early telephone companies, telephone operators were responsible for connecting calls by hand. This manual process was time-consuming and prone to errors. Additionally, it was challenging to provide round-the-clock service. Meanwhile, at Bell Labs, William Shockley, Walter Brattain, and John Bardeen, while researching ways to improve mechanical telephone switching systems, invented the transistor in 1947. This device could function as an electrical switch. For this achievement, they were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1956. The term transistor is a combination of transfer and varistor, reflecting the device's semiconductor nature of both conducting and resisting electric current. Transistors have 3 leads, current flows into one and out of another. The middle lead acts as a control, determining the amount of current that flows out. This mechanism allows electrical signals to perform the function of mechanical switches. We established a system where the presence or absence of an electric current represents 1 or 0, respectively. This is known as the binary system. Computers are built upon this binary foundation. To handle the vast array of information in binary format, a multitude of transistors work together. As the amount of information to be processed increased, more and more transistors were needed. To address this, larger and larger circuits were eventually replaced with smaller IC chips. Ultimately, as transistors were combined and miniaturized, they evolved into the integrated circuits we know today. Did Bell Telephone face difficulties in commercializing the transistor? Bell Telephone allowed other companies to use their transistor patents by paying licensing fees. Companies like GE, IBM, Texas Instruments, Fairchild Semiconductor, and even Sony in Japan received licenses. Texas Instruments was the first to mount transistors onto an IC chip in 1958, creating the foundation for today's semiconductor devices. Shortly after, in the early 1960s, Fairchild Semiconductor successfully commercialized the IC chip. Since then, these chips have continued to shrink in size. In the 1960s and 1970s, the United States and the Soviet Union were engaged in a fierce arms race. American companies focused on developing computers for military and space missions. Meanwhile, Japanese companies, restricted from military activities after World War II, turned to using transistors for consumer electronics. In the mid-1970s, the Japanese government initiated the Pan-Japanese Project, bringing together major electronics companies like Hitachi, Mitsubishi, Fujitsu, and Toshiba. Through this project, Japan acquired the technological prowess to become the world's leading producer of DRAM chips. As Japan gained dominance in the semiconductor market, U.S. companies faced difficulties. In response, the U.S. government intervened, leading to the U.S.-Japan Semiconductor Agreement of 1986. This agreement restricted Japanese companies from engaging in price competition in the US market and facilitated entry for US semiconductor companies into the Japanese market. Additionally, the Plaza Accord of 1985, which aimed to appreciate the Japanese yen, further weakened the competitiveness of Japanese semiconductor companies. As a result, Japanese semiconductor companies began to decline, creating an opportunity for South Korean companies like Samsung to enter the market. Ironically, the US government's intervention didn't provide the expected boost to American semiconductor companies. The real turning point came with the rise of the PC industry in the 1980s. While DRAM had previously been the industry's mainstream, the PC revolution shifted the focus to CPUs. IBM launched its PC in 1981, followed by Apple in 1984, adopting Intel and Motorola CPUs, respectively. The growing complexity of semiconductor manufacturing, driven by the proliferation of PCs and gaming consoles like Nintendo, led to skyrocketing costs for production facilities. This prompted decoupling of design and manufacturing in the 1980s. Companies like Qualcomm and ARM pioneered the fabless model, concentrating on chip design while outsourcing manufacturing. AMD and Texas Instruments later adopted similar strategies, gradually moving away from in-house manufacturing. These fabless companies outsourced their manufacturing to foundries, one of the most prominent being TSMC, based in Taiwan. Founded by Morris Chang, a former executive at Texas Instruments, in 1987, TSMC capitalized on the industry trend of separating design from manufacturing, ultimately becoming the world's largest foundry. In the late 1990s, as the demand for 3D graphics grew due to the popularity of video games, Jensen Huang, a former AMD engineer, co-founded NVIDIA to pioneer the GPU or graphics chip market. The limited number of cores, or brains, in traditional CPUs made it challenging to calculate the values for the countless pixels on a monitor. Meanwhile, the widespread adoption of the internet and the growing reliance on computers in businesses during the 1990s led to a surge in demand for CPUs designed for data centers. The early 2000s saw a surge in the demand for application processors, or AP chip, following the release of the iPhone in 2007. In addition, the burgeoning cloud computing and AI industries fueled the growth of the data center CPU market. The specialization of the semiconductor industry led to the creation of distinct markets for chip design and manufacturing. Companies that excelled in either design or manufacturing emerged to cater to these specialized needs. Integrated device manufacturers, such as Intel and Samsung, are companies that handle both the design and manufacturing of semiconductor chips. Because of their small size, semiconductors are commonly called chips, likening them to small pieces of food. Nevertheless, there is no universally agreed upon definition for the term chip. Some people use it as a general term for all semiconductor devices, while others use it specifically to refer to the central processing unit, the most crucial component of a computer. As a result, the term chip can mean different things to different people in different situations. Since our topic today is Intel, let's narrow down the definition of a chip to a logic semiconductor, referring to CPU and GPU. Before we dive into that, let's briefly examine how data flows between the major components of a PC. Upon initiating a program or opening a file, the requisite data is transferred from the SSD, a non-volatile storage device, to the DRAM, a volatile memory. The DRAM serves as the primary memory directly accessible by the CPU to temporarily hold data essential for program execution. When data is moved to the DRAM, the parts that the CPU needs right away are copied to a special kind of memory inside the CPU called the cache. The CPU uses this cache to do its calculations. Once the calculations are finished, the results are saved back to the cache and DRAM, or sent to places like your monitor. The real process is a bit more complicated, but this gives you a basic idea. For tasks like gaming that involve heavy 3D graphics, the CPU can't handle everything on its own. So, the CPU gives the GPU display data, and the GPU uses this to calculate the color of each pixel and create the final image. Inside a CPU, there's a brain that does all the actual calculations. We call this the core. If there are multiple cores, the CPU can handle several tasks at once. The number of calculations these cores perform in a second is measured in clock speed. A higher clock speed means faster calculations. Additionally, a core with more transistors can handle more complex calculations. Then, let's compare the different functional characteristics by the chip type. PC chips needed to solve problems fast, one after the other. That's why they have a high clock speed to do many calculations per second, even if they don't have many cores. Data center chips handled lots of simple tasks over and over. It's easy to understand if you imagine Google computers processing all the search queries typed in by countless people around the world. They needed to be reliable and use less power, not just fast. That's why they have more cores, but slower speeds. GPUs have lots of small cores to handle the many calculations needed for graphics cells. This means they don't need to be as fast as PC chips, but they use more power and get hotter because they have too many cores. Mobile chips, or APs, needed to be small and use less power. So they got slower but more power efficient. Let's take a look again at the key players in each semiconductor market segment. The design of logic chips is primarily a competition among Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA, while MediaTek, Qualcomm, and mobile captives mainly compete in the AP market. And in the manufacturing sector, TSMC, Samsung, Intel, and Global Foundries are competing. Most PC CPUs, including those for laptops, are based on the x86 architecture developed by Intel. In 2023, Intel holds a dominant 86% market share, which is 6 times that of AMD. However, NVIDIA's GPUs dominate the data center chip market. In 2023, Intel's data center chip revenue was only a third of NVIDIA's. We've grouped data center chips separately from CPUs and GPUs because the boundaries between data center CPUs and GPUs are blurring due to the growth of the AI market. Data center CPUs are adopting features similar to GPUs and vice versa, leading to a converging market. While Intel manufactures its CPUs in-house, AMD and NVIDIA primarily outsource their manufacturing to TSMC. Given this, let's also take a look at the scale of the foundry market. The foundry market size in 2023 was approximately $130 billion, with TSMC capturing half of that. Intel is estimated to have recorded around $18 billion in foundry revenue, most of which is presumed to be from captive sales. Big tech companies are currently focused on developing their own AI chips for their data centers, and this is expected to drive growth in the foundry market. This is why Intel is investing heavily in the foundry business. In Part 1, we explored the birth and development of the chip industry. Now that we have a solid foundation, let's dive deeper into Intel's performance and strategy in Part 2. See you there.